You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Presented by Betano, it's time for the Monday edition of Leafs Morning Take, the lunar eclipse or solar eclipse or the eclipse, whatever they're calling it. It's the big edition of the Monday program. Leafs Morning Take presented by Betano, Nick Alberga, and Anthony Stewart. What's going on, Stewie?
I'm doing well. Everyone asked me what my plans are for the eclipse today, and it runs right into my nap time, so I'll be taking a nap. So I'll catch up on the play-by-play afterwards.
Dude, I couldn't believe how much play this has been getting the last 2 weeks. Like they're canceling school and this and that. Like I don't understand it. Just don't look at the sky. Like people are afraid for their lives. It doesn't make sense to me.
But it's 2024. When you tell somebody not to do something, that's exactly when they do it. So again, I think the easiest thing to say, hey, let's have a PA day, let's shut everybody down, as opposed to half of society being half blind. So it's like, I understand it. I have kids, and there's probably 2 out of my 4 I think would probably be looking directly into the sun if given the chance.
Yeah, that's fair. I can understand why schools may be closed, especially recess. Maybe you don't go outdoors for recess, but like I don't know if you've caught this. They made some Eclipse sunglasses now. Like, I can only imagine how much those are going for on Amazon.
Yeah, probably $20.99 or something like that. So I honestly, it doesn't affect my day, so that's why I haven't looked into it. Again, I'm usually on social media all over everything, but this is the one thing I think I've skipped.
Yeah, it's, a lot's happening, to be fair. I understand you're coming off a big weekend of WrestleMania. It's like the Leafs Morning Take after Mania. This is a blockbuster, man.
Yeah, again, I caught some clips there. I show Speed actually, getting kicked and RKO'd and all that too. So again, I used to be a big wrestling fan. Saturday mornings, I used to watch Monday Night Raw as well too. And I think I've done every single move of my little brother Chris when we were younger too. So again, I haven't really caught too much up on my wrestling, but it's good to see the Rock's back. Good to see Randy Orton do well. So it's not bad at all.
I think it's hilarious that you know who I Show Speed is, because I had no fucking clue who that was under the Prime outfit yesterday. Like that made no sense to me, and it's so funny. Like sometimes WWE thinks they're like in touch with what's going on. Nobody knew who that guy was, man.
Well, I heard from the videos I saw, the crowd was going wild once he showed his face too. But what the kids are into now, they're watching videos of other people playing video games. So he's one of those guys that streams his video game playing, and he gets millions and millions of viewers. So it's something about the kids that enjoy him. I'm not a big fan; it's not my cup of tea. But again, today's generation is a lot different than past for sure.
Gotta respect it, and I won't lie, we have tinkered with the idea of me and Jay Rosehill watching a Leafs game while people watch us. So I can't chirp them for doing that and the talent they put forth. But I Show Speed, I didn't know who the hell that was until WrestleMania Sunday, and gladly and gratefully he was RKO'd by Randy Orton. So I love to see that. All right, to bigger and pressing issues. I want to make it crystal clear, Stewie. The Ottawa Senators are a bunch of hypocrites. Absolutely hypocrites. What transpired over the weekend. I thought it was hilarious. Hockey karma is fantastic. In case you missed it, Brady Tkachuk blew a gasket because of Nico Hischier, the captain of the New Jersey Devils, putting the puck into the empty net after the final horn. I mean, it's up to interpretation if he saw the green light, which said the game was over, but he places it into the net, and the Ottawa Senators go crazy, which was weird, because they didn't feel the disrespect, whole Ridley Griggs situation. Hilarious to me.
It is kind of funny, but I understand sort of the thinking behind it, right? In the NHL, you sell wins or you sell hope. And what has been the story the last 48 hours, especially over the weekend? Oh, look at how passionate Matthew Tkachuk is. Look how passionate the Ottawa Senators are. They're not making the playoffs, but they definitely care, and they're going to be a team to be reckoned with next year. And the reality is we've been talking about that for 2-3 years. And so what makes that situation a little bit, frustrating is because they were complaining about Morgan Riley's reaction to, what he did. So do I give Hischier a little bit of grace? Yes. He didn't take a slap shot. And again, it wasn't 6-7 seconds after the buzzer went. It was probably a second or two. But again, Ottawa, I think Tkachuk, again, it was just trying to change the narrative. You'd rather that than, Ottawa doesn't care. They're mailing it in. We saw Tkachuk at, the golf store buying some golf clubs. So they're selling that hope, and that's the reasoning behind it. But again, there is some hypocrisy in it. But They're doing what they need to do to stay relevant in Ottawa. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. It's hilarious. Like they felt disrespected after, the whole, like they didn't think it was disrespectful, I should say, that really Greg hammered that puck top cheese into the empty net. But God forbid after the whistle, you put it in an empty net. Oh my goodness. It's like the end of the world. I thought that was hilarious, man. It's just like hypocrisy to its finest. And the reaction to the Ottawa Senators, more so Brady Tkachuk, like nobody else really reacted but him, and they had to like hold him back. And I think he's such an amazing captain. It's unfortunate he's in Ottawa, but like I just thought it was funny that happens like 2 months after the fact, and Sens fans still have the Leafs names in their mouth. If you watch on social media, they're still talking about the Ridley Griggs situation.
Yeah, it just goes back to what I was mentioning about changing that narrative, right? And that was the storyline. It was that. And, we're talking about how great of a leader he is. He had 16 hits and the most of all time. So, part of that is just, maybe controlling the narrative and the media narrative that is in Ottawa, because any way you dice it, I think it is a disaster of a season, right? Again, they were supposed to have some goaltending come in and right the ship, and it hasn't been the case there as well. They were talking about them winning a round this year. And again, I've learned a little bit not to jump on that bandwagon, because I was on TV the previous 2-3 seasons talking about, oh, this is the year that the Ottawa Senators do it. I remember being in end of January, mid-February, they're, 14 points out, and, oh, are they done yet? And I would say no. So again, they have to find a way to stay relevant. They have to find a way to change that narrative. And again, as I say now, I know this is going to be the headline leading on social media. So anyway you dice, I think it's a disappointment in Ottawa, because people had higher expectations for the group. And, I think this just adds to a little bit of the embarrassment of the season. That's for sure.
Tough weekend in Ottawa, not so much for the Maple Leafs. They win in Montreal and they clinch a playoff spot for the 8th straight season. I can't believe it, man. 8 playoffs for Auston Matthews already.
Yeah, and I wish I had a better memory, because I remember sitting on the show and we were contemplating if they were going to make the playoffs. Were we not? Were we talking about that for a couple segments? But again, I think this group is just so much talent up front, so much talent to not really, be a group that is going to be constantly in the playoffs. And, why I think this year's different in years past. Look at all the adversity that this team has gone throughout the year, missing Morgan Rielly. They had Mitch Marner done for 12 games. Joseph Wall was hurt with the high ankle sprain. Giordano was in and out of the lineup. I'm checking my notes here as well. Bertuzzi and Domi, struggled for the first half of the season. So they had all these reasons to sort of be on the outside looking in, but the star power and their main guys got them through it. But what I like about this group right now, the last 15, 20 games, it's more than the big four going. There's other guys stepping up, having big games, or looking more like a team. The narrative 2-3 weeks ago or 2-3 months ago was, is this team strong enough? Are they hard enough? Or are they too soft? And, they went and pushed around the Boston Bruins in one game where they went out and added a little bit of truculence too. So there's a lot of difference in years past. And I'm not surprised that this year they made the playoffs, just based on the players they brought in and the adversity that they handled. And they seem to be thriving now leading into the playoffs.
Look, I mean, the proof's going to be in the pudding. There's 6 games remaining in the regular season, then it gets going for real on April 20th. But I think the Leafs, at the very least, have put themselves in the best position possible, considering where they were like 2.5 months ago, where you're feeling good, you're getting healthy, you're getting production up and down the lineup. But I think Sheldon Keefe and company have to be feeling really, really good. And again, considering where this team was even 3 months ago to where it is now, I think it was fair to ask a lot of questions at that time. Is this team good enough? Can they rally? Can they get over, some of the coaching deficiencies and the roster deficiencies? Yes, yes, and yes. They're going to the Stanley Cup playoffs. It remains to be seen who they're going to play in round 1. But I think at this point, they've played everybody and their mother. Doesn't matter about the matchup. It matters about this team playing the best hockey at the right time. And you can argue they are right now. I mean, they're playing pretty damn well. And they have been playing playoff hockey, in my opinion, for a month and a half now.
Yeah, they have, and they've been doing it by committee, and that's why I think it's a different type of season, right? And we're sitting there, oh well, what's going on with Nylander? Well, he's flirting with 100 points, right? And he has 5 games, he only has 2 assists, but he's got 9 points in his last 10 games. You're seeing the evolution. You're seeing guys like Nick Robertson have a career year. You're seeing Domi and Bertuzzi step up. So you can go up and down that lineup and find a lot more positives than negatives, right? The defense, different guys stepping in, bringing in guys at the deadline that sort of had impact as well. So, if you want to make a run, you're going to have 13, 14 forwards. You're going to have 7, 8, 9D, and, some goaltending stepping up at different times. So that's sort of a recipe for success for this group because they've shown that they can handle that adversity. They've had every excuse to go on extended losing streaks, but they find a way. And I think that's a positive for a group that's ready to make an extended run, finding a way and not finding excuses. So it's a lot more positive negatives, as I mentioned, but playoffs is a totally different beast. And that's sort of where their Achilles heel has been the last couple of years. But again, I think this group is different. You talk about the Florida Panthers being head and shoulders above the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they're 5 points behind, and the Leafs have a game or two in hand. And again, yes, Panthers have struggled the last 2 weeks, but again, if you ask me, in my honest opinion, between Boston, Florida, and Toronto, if all things go correct and their best players are playing the best, who is the best team? I have to say the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Ahead of the Florida Panthers.
Yes.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, you can make that argument, and I think that's a fair argument to make, just strictly based on star power, right? Like, I mean, which team in this league, and I mean, this is not being, me putting my Leafs colored glasses on. Which team in the league can match this team talent wise in terms of just sheer talent, right?
And that's the key, though. But we know in playoffs, talent isn't the end all be all, and there's a lot more other factors. You need depth. You need guys outplaying their cap hit. You need an unsung hero. And it just seems, the last couple seasons, it's, if Auston Matthews and Marner aren't showing up and having an A+ series, they're dead in the water. But looking at this group, who's going to score that big goal in Game 7? There's 6, 7 guys on this group I think can score that goal. Whereas last year we're questioning, can Pierre Engvall be the guy that steps up and plays that big heavy hockey, knowing that that's not the case. So for me, I wouldn't want to be playing the Maple Leafs because if they get hot, they get some goaltending, they're getting a lot of power plays. That's a group that I do not want to see in that first round.
Well, we'll see what happens. We got to make T-shirts that say "We'll see" because every springtime it's the same conversation with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And starting April 20th, we'll start to find out our true answer on this Maple Leafs team. Make sure to tune in tonight, the Leafs Nation After Dark with Zach Phillips, directly following the Leafs and Pittsburgh Penguins game. That should be a lot of fun. Also in podcast form now, so make sure you check that out at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts. Brought to you by DoorDash. It's time for the appetizer. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off, up to $10 in value and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. When you download the DoorDash app, enter code NATION25. That's code NATION25. All in uppercase, 25% off your first order with DoorDash. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply. The Maple Leafs defeating the Montreal Canadiens 4-2 on Saturday. They sweep the season series at the Habs. They've won 5 in a row against Montreal. And the biggest positive I took from that game, the new look lines and the fact through every line produced a goal. At least the top 9 and the fourth line played really, really well as well.
Yeah, and I'll admit I was wrong where I thought Marner would be sliding back in with Auston Matthews, but he looks pretty good with JT and McMann too, and going on McMann's goal and for Marner, to being out 12 games and not necessarily miss a beat. Again, he's not the guy that over exerts himself in any sense of the word in a lot of the games. He's one of those players that can sort of, put it into second gear and really take over games. So that just shows, he gets an opportunity to make a play. He can make high-end plays with little to no space at all. And, that was a great sauce pass that he made to McMann on the goal there as well. So, some people are in years past, we've talked about it. If Nylander was on the third line, we'd be talking about people losing jobs. We'd be talking about the sky is falling. We'd talk about putting the parade plans back away. But there's a different narrative now, even on the media side, saying, hey, yeah, it's not a bad thing now because we have 3 balanced lines. It's not about who's where, who's slotted. It's not about points. It's about getting wins. And when you have your top end talent spread out throughout those 3 different lines, it's very, very difficult for the opposing team's defensive schemes to really try to shut those guys down. And homework Nyes and Nylander line, they looked good as well. You're seeing Nyes score his 14th goal of the year, and that's another guy I think is poised for a big, big playoffs. His play on the wall and getting to the net, McMann's speed as well. So that's what I like. It's different. We know Auston Matthews is probably going to score every other game, but pretty much every other night there's another unsung hero or a guy stepping up, making big plays. And that's why I feel this group is different this year.
Yeah, because that's the big story every spring, if you do recall. Like, number one, the power play goes dry. Number two, the big boys are so. And number three, the depth is nowhere to be found. And I think the Leafs, at the very least, have put themselves in a position where it's not just the big four that can carry them. I think it's massive this time of year. Like, you need goals from whoever will give it to you, whether it's Connor Dewar, Ryan Reaves, Matthew Nyes, Bobby McMann. Like, you need these type of guys to elevate. I think that's my lasting memory from teams like Washington and St. Louis. Like, yeah, they had their big boys, but they also had the contributing guys, the fourth line guys. I think Alex Steen was a fourth liner for St. Louis when they win the cup. You need those guys. It's so paramount for success in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And that was my biggest takeaway. Again, when the Leafs are coming at you in waves, when they can roll four lines, they're a tough team to handle. And now you sort of have the talent level through lines 1 to 3, obviously with Nylander on line 3 or whatever you want to phrase the lines. I think it's such a more dynamic look for this Leafs team. And quite frankly, it's a matchup nightmare for the opposition, I think.
Yeah, and it's going to have coaches now have to go and do extra video or try to rotate lines. And, in the playoffs, there seems to be a little bit more panic. So if this team comes out first round in the first couple of games, they can really take over a series in those first 2 games. And, let's talk about the fourth line where, everyone was ready to write off Ryan Reaves and buy out his contract and fire him into the sun and, give him a one-way ticket out of town. He's found a way since that injury to come back and really, reinvent himself. And I had a conversation when I think it was when he got scratched the first time. And I said, hey, man, this is a different market. And there's a lot of reason why guys don't sign here. You're here for 3 years. Just focus on playing your game. Don't worry about the media. They're going to be watching if you change your shoelaces. They're going to be watching for everything you say. They're going to be watching when you have your shirt on and your shirt off. It's that type of market. Do not let it bother you. And since he came back from injury, he's found a way to maybe just sit back and watch from the sidelines and see what works and what doesn't. So he's reinvented himself. He's been playing great. Dewar's been a great player as well, too. So that fourth line, it's not just the clock killers. Usually they're the clock killing line where it's just, hey, let's go out there and try to get 40 seconds in, do not get scored on, and, give a rest to the top line 1 or 2 before they come out. But they're out there sustaining forechecks, creating opportunities, playing physical. Look at Reaves against Tampa Bay, those 2 big hits. And, he made Hedman shrink a couple pounds and a couple inches as well, too. So it's good to see a group because if you're trying to win a round or go on an extended run, it can't be 1, 2, 2 lines, in 4D. You need everybody going. And so far, so good. They've been consistent. I think that's another thing. They've been consistent most of the year. And again, I always keep saying that's why I think it's different. But again, the playoffs, it's a different story, and we'll see if they can continue that.
I wanted to give Ryan Reaves his flowers on today's show because, number one, I thought he did his job to a T on Saturday. So David Kampf takes a questionable hit by Michael Pezzetta, and Reaves pretty much goes to Pezzetta at the faceoff, one of the faceoffs, a couple shifts after, and essentially says we're going. Good on Pezzetta to answer the call, but he pumped the wheels off him. And I think on top of that, this is the benefit of Arbor Jackeye not playing for the Montreal Canadiens. Ryan Reaves is a bully all night. And, dude, nobody could do a thing to the guy. It was hilarious.
Yeah, you're looking at the beginning of the fight there, too. It's like Pezzetta's like, oh, what do we do here? He had no idea. And, again, I've been on the receiving end of some Ryan Reaves bombs, and it hurts. I was getting them on the helmet. I'm just happy that my helmet stayed on for majority of the fight, or I'd be, probably, slipping on a banana peel like Pezzetta there as well. But just knowing that, it's not just him on the ice. It's every time you skate by the bench and having to listen to him bark at you, it takes you off your game. So it's tough to ignore because it's not just, well, I don't play against Ryan Reaves. I don't have to deal with them. It's him, constantly staying involved in the game. And say what you want, it distracts the other team. It keeps the other team on their toes. And it now ultimately affects the other team now where, I remember being in those situations saying, I got this guy lined up. Am I really going to rub him out and take a liberty on him knowing that I have to deal with the guys like Reaves? So I'd have to make that split-second decision. And oftentimes I say, well, you know what? Tonight's not the night. So he is playing his game to a T, and people are saying, oh, it's Pezzetta. Well, if you don't go make that hit, you don't have to deal with him. So people are talking about, well, if Jackeye, that is Ryan Reaves' rule. He's not afraid of anybody. If he is backing down, it's probably due to the coach telling him not to step up or do anything or just stick to playing hockey. But when you have a player like that, Whereas my job to play physical, it made me lack physicality depending on if I really felt it or had it with me in that night to really go above and beyond on that physical level. So more often times than not, I was like, let's just let Ryan Reaves sleep, because you don't want to get involved, because it can change the course of the game.
I've really come around on that narrative, because at the beginning, that was the big story in Toronto. Why did they bring in Ryan Reaves? So nobody would take liberties at the big boys, because they would have to deal with Ryan Reaves. But the fortunate thing is he's actually playing really, really well right now, which means more ice time, right? So he's on there more. He's playing well. He's playing effective. And I'm actually subscribing to that theory a bit more than I did, say, maybe 3-4 months ago, where I think there's slight hesitation in the opponents, knowing that they would have to deal with Ryan Reaves after. Like, I truly do believe that. Like, he's got to be playing some of the best hockey in his career right now, just in the impact he's having. Like, if you do recall earlier in the year, yeah, he may have been fighting, but was he really having an impact on the say of the game? Not really. But even in that loss to Tampa, as you mentioned, the 2 big hits on Hedman, just leaving his mark, man. Like, that's what you need from a guy like Ryan Reaves. And again, I think he deserves his flowers. The last couple months, he has been so good for these guys.
Yeah, and if you want to gauge, his impact on this team, they panned to Auston Matthews after that fight, and that's probably the most excited I've ever seen Auston Matthews. And this is the guy flirting with 70 goals. So here's a guy that understands the importance of a guy on that team. And sometimes when you have guys that go out and fight, it could be a sideshow, and there's actually star players that roll their eyes and like, oh man, I got to play with this guy. But look at that. He's genuinely excited. That I was trying to find the perfect GIF, and the only one that I didn't post it, was Marv and Home Alone when he ended up getting electrocuted. That was the best way to sum it up. He had genuine joy in seeing that. So when your star player's fired up and he's got energy and it gets him into the game, just imagine everybody else. So that shows the impact of Ryan Reaves when he's doing his job and he's at his best.
The big question for you, game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, is Ryan Reaves on your roster, in your lineup?
110%.
Yeah.
110%. Yeah. Because if you watch the game, right, I think the one area where he focused was his D zone coverage, but I think he's moving his feet a lot more and breaking the puck out. Sometimes when that puck came along the wall, his foot speed wasn't there and he was getting caught in his end for extended period of time, but he seems like he's improved his footwork. He's getting pucks out of the D zone and he's getting in on the forecheck. And it was tough for him at the beginning of the year to really get a piece of a guy, but it just seems consistently he's getting in on the forecheck, turning pucks over. And if you clock his speed, when he's moving full speed, he's one of the faster guys on this Leafs roster. So yes, there's no fighting in playoffs, but that intimidation factor and that physicality factor still has a big impact on the game. He's the number 1 player that adds that element to the group. So I have him in game 1. And I think the key is as well is putting him with players that complement him. And, seeing a Kampf and a Dewar, they can move their feet, they can make plays, they can play solid defense in their D zone where they're not stuck in their zone extended period of time. So I think that's a key that they didn't really focus on at the beginning of the year. The right mix of 4th line guys, and it seems like they're hitting their stride right now.
Is Bobby McMann a lock for your game 1 roster? He has 15 goals now in the season, 14 even strength, 13 in the past 26. Is he on your game 1 roster?
I think so. And I think the key is, you mentioned the even strength. He's a guy that doesn't need power play time. He doesn't need 20 minutes to score his goals. What was he at? I think 14 minutes, I believe, last game, if I check. But he's a guy that you can slide up and down the lineup, and he has the speed and he can make plays. But when he has that puck below the dots, it's going on net or it's getting to the net for a scoring opportunity. So yes, there's a lot of pegs that do they fit? For me, I'm like, well, Robertson should be in there too. But again, who comes out, right? You need your Camps, you need your Holmbergs, I believe. What happens when Yankroak comes back? Gregor has an element of speed as well too. So it's a good problem to have where who's in, as opposed to, man, we need more bodies because we don't have enough. But all those guys we mentioned, I could see possibly being in and out, because you're going to need different looks, different lineup matchups, different strengths versus weaknesses. So it's a good problem to have if I'm Sheldon Keefe.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. I know I'm getting some heat at the from the chat, just even asking you about Bob McMann.
I can't see it. Why can't I see it? Why? I want to see the chat. I want to answer these questions.
Open up YouTube and you can find the chat and you can heave away with the chat. They're asking if you played in the NHL. A couple people didn't realize that you played in the NHL, which is crazy to me. Yeah, I know. You're like Stone Cold. What? But
that's only my first NHL gold puck behind me and my World Junior gold medal and my World Junior job. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. So maybe I'll stay off of YouTube. But anyways,
no, I suggest you go on YouTube. But yeah, that's my wonder. adjustments in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Yes, McMahon's going to start. Yes, Reaves going to start. Nick Robertson probably in the outside looking in. We're going to get to the Calle Yarncroke conversation. But I think at the very least, like, this is a good thing to have our options, because some years this team has entered the playoffs, their roster, and there's a big drop off from who's in the lineup to who's out the lineup. And I think you can make a case where there's a lot of these guys who can play in the bottom six at any given time. I love this, man.
Yeah, and I think it's, comes down to matchup. If you're playing against Boston versus versus the Florida Panthers, I think you need a different element. I think with Boston, maybe you're dressing a little bit of a heavier lineup, a lineup that's going to be into the board battles versus a complete speed game versus the Florida Panthers. But again, there's going to be injuries, knock on wood. There's going to be guys not playing well. And there's been guys that, are going to be coming out. But I think, a guy like McMann, I think he's earned his stripes, because we talk about adversity. Here's a guy that came out of nowhere, scored a bunch of goals. The game that he scored his hat trick, he wasn't even supposed to play. So he's come out of nowhere. He's earned his opportunity. He's earned a little bit of rope, and that's why he's in right now as opposed to Robertson. But that's another player, and I've been an advocate for Nick Robertson the last 2-3 years. Give him 25 games. Give him 25 games. Leave him alone. Leave him in the top 9. Give him his penalty kill time. Give him his second unit, and I think you'd be shocked at what type of player this is. And yes, he has some deficiencies maybe in the D zone. Sometimes he gets knocked off the puck on the forecheck, but it's up to Sheldon Keefe to put him with players that are going to insulate him and complement his game. So Robertson, for the ice time that he's had, 12 goals, 12 assists, 24 points, in and out of the lineup, up and down from the minors. It's not easy scoring 12 goals. It's tough to get 10. It's tough to get 5. For the adversity he's gone through, I think he's deserved an opportunity, and when called upon, I think he'll get that opportunity. We haven't seen the last of him, and I would not be surprised to see him perform in the playoffs.
Speaking of performing, Auston Matthews, number 64. It's just so insane. This guy scores every game now, needs 6 and 6 to hit the 70-goal plateau. The longer this goes, the more I think it's going to happen, man. Like, it feels inevitable, just the way this guy scores goals. He's going to have one of those games, whether it's against Pittsburgh, 2 against New Jersey this week, where he gets 2 or 3 goals, and I think he's going to be right there at the end of the day.
Yeah, but we have the naysayer saying he needs to rest. He needs to rest.
That's me, dude. I think he needs rest.
Need him fresh. And I'll tell you this, the one time when you're worried about injuries and worried about being fresh, that's when you get hurt. We're built for 82 games. That's why we play 82 games. No one just came up with that magic number. We are able to do it, especially with modern science, with therapy. Guys are in the hot tub. Guys are in the cold tub. Guys are on the massage table every day. I'm not a big fan of rest, because if he now say he sits the last 2 games and he comes out flat the first game 1, we shouldn't have rested Auston Matthews. So yes, there's that risk of injury, but this is a guy that doesn't necessarily put himself in harm's way. Yes, he blocks a lot of shots, but a lot of those minutes he's playing, they look like easy minutes. He looks like he's handling it really, really well. He doesn't look, you don't pan to him on the bench and see him huffing and puffing. The game just seems like it's so easy for him. And why I want to see him, score 70 goals is because I think there's almost a lack of respect and a lack of appreciation for, what type of player he is and who he is amongst the greats, right? He is outscoring Alex Ovechkin at this part of his career. Yes, there's a longevity aspect, but for him to be on the second tier below a McKinnon, below a McDavid, below a Kucherov, I don't believe it, because I'm going by the guys that I've played with that were 35, 40 goal scorers. These guys were rock stars doing whatever they want. So to be scoring 70 goals, I don't understand how we're not talking about it more. Yes, we're in the Leafs market. We're always talking about it, but I don't think there's that natural respect for someone that scores, 60 plus goals on the regular. So I think for him, it's an amazing feat. I won't stop saying his praises, and I think he'll go down as, if not the greatest, one of the best American goal scorers of all time.
Amen to that. And it's the folks in Edmonton who create that narrative, by the way, because last time I checked, I think Nikita Kucherov needs like 6 apples to get to 100 assists. But last time I checked, McDavid he's incredible because he gets to 100 assists. But how about Kucherov in Tampa, right? So
yeah, Kucherov's 3 assists away from 100, and we're talking about 100 assists. That's so amazing. It's gonna, but again, it is a great feat.
It is.
What is Auston Matthews' even strength? And he's scoring a lot of those goals even strength.
That's the incredible part to me, man. Everything comes. It doesn't come into the empty net. Okay, taking nothing away from Ovechkin, he's got 2 2 empty netters and 64 goals, man. Like, that's pretty damn awesome.
He is such a great goal scorer that we're talking about him having an off season when he scored 40. And I'm talking about when I played, if you were 40 goals, that is like, I'm backing up the Brinks truck. I'm now set for life. I'm signing my big ticket. That's at 40, and he's at 60 plus right now. So from a former player standpoint, if you ask some of these guys around the league, would they rather be a McDavid or an Auston Matthews? I think they would say Auston Matthews, because scoring 70 or flirting with 70 every year, that's a tremendous feat for the guys that have played the game and understand how hard it is to consistently score goals pretty much every game.
They're both incredible. Bottom line, they're both incredible. But yeah, I want to see Matthews get to 70. This is really, really exciting stuff. Mitch Marner comes back, missed 12 games with a high ankle sprain, 1 assist, 17-20. Thought he looked a bit rusty, but got better as the game went on. You're going to see that. He's back with John Tavares, too, playing with Bob McMann. So, again, it opens up the ice. I still like what I'm seeing from that top line. I wouldn't deviate from it. You got Marner in line 2, of course, Nylander in line 3. But what did you make of Marner's return to the lineup?
Yeah, it's, for every game that you miss, it takes probably about 2 days to get back. So I think you're not going to really see a prime Mitch Marner until probably when the playoffs start. But again, what did he play? 17 minutes, you said? So that's
Yeah.
not too bad. The fact that he was able to play 17 after missing all that time, and what I like about that is he sort of quieted the noise in the media about asking him about his injury and all that. So if he came out and he was -3 and he fell into the boards and he looked like he was about to cry, that would have continued the narrative. Oh, what's going on with Mitch Marner? So he quieted a lot of people with his play last night. So I think for him, it's everyone's waiting for him to make a mistake because they're like, oh, they've played so well with him out of the lineup. Let's not mistake in this. He is a top player on this team. And if this team is going to make a run, they need him. They need him playing his A-plus game. And last night was the first step towards the positive of him doing that. So were people expecting him to come in and have 5 points? Probably not. But I know there are some naysayers that are just looking for something to say, and he's quieted down a lot of those naysayers after one game.
In the weeds, man. In the weeds. I love that. This segment is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Get custom ring building delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece Program and unbeatable pricing policy. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. A quick look at the standings. I love the scoreboard watching this time of year, but the Maple Leafs 5 points back of Florida for second in the Atlantic Division with 2 games in hand, and 4 points up on Tampa for third in the Atlantic with 1 game in hand. It's likely to be the Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers. I think that's what we're getting at here in the standings. We thought that for a while it was going to be Leafs Boston. Now it seems like almost a foregone conclusion it's going to be Leafs Panthers here.
Yeah, and it just seems that, the Panthers have been struggling as of late, losers of 3 of their last 5. Yes, they got a point the other night too. And again, they did have some injury problems. Ekblad went down, I believe. So
Yep.
Again, that's another team where, not a lot of adversity as the season went along, and they're starting to go through it now. So how do they respond? Is it going to make them weak, or is it going to make them stronger? But going back to my comments before, yes, they have Montour. Yes, they have Barkov. Yes, they have 3-4 lines that can skate and push the pace, and they're buying into the system to the T. But I think they do have some weaknesses. And Barkov, he's one of those goalies. Bobrovsky is one of those goalies. If you get on him early and you chase him out of that net, that can change the course of a series. So I think for Toronto, the key is getting on them early, trying to overwhelm them, play with a little bit more energy and physicality that they has of late. And if you ask me, and you'll probably be a detractor on this, if Toronto Stars versus Florida Stars are playing their A game, and yes, it's been tough for Toronto Stars to be consistently consistent, I think this is a Leafs series. And we've seen it in years past where these top teams have been deemed the number one team and the President Trophy contenders get knocked out pretty easily first round. I can see this being the case for the Florida Panthers.
Man, the NHL is a wild world. I was just flipping on X on Twitter, and Mikhail Sergachev is in a non-contact jersey at lighting practice. Like, where'd this guy come from? Maybe he watched WrestleMania last night and The Undertaker, but like Tomas Hertl's back tonight for Vegas. It's just a wacky time of year, I guess the best way to phrase it, where guys you don't expect to come back. Matt Murray's back in the mix for the Maple Leafs. It's sort of amazing how the playoffs, with no salary cap, just 2 weeks away, and these guys start to emerge, man. It's a puzzling world, but the Leafs get set for the Pittsburgh Penguins tonight. Some lineup news. I know a lot of you in the chat were asking about Joel Edmondson. He's not going to play tonight or tomorrow. Sheldon Keefe pretty much alluding to the fact that Thursday could be the date to return for Joel Edmondson, who's missed about 6 or 7 games with an undisclosed ailment. Looks like Ilya Samsonov's going to start here against Pittsburgh, and it looks like they're going to go with the same lines as Saturday. Why would you deviate from what you put together in a victory, right?
Yeah, and this is a Pittsburgh team that's fighting for their lives, and they have a captain in Sidney Crosby who's put this team on their back. Where 10 days ago we were talking about doing the eulogy and are we trading Crosby and what are the odds? 87% that he's back or he's gone next year. So that was the narrative about 10 days ago, and they went there and put together a nice little groupings of games, winners of I don't know if it's 4 or 5 games in a
It's an
row.
8-game point streak.
Yeah, they're 2 points out of third place in the Metro, 1 point out of the wild card. So this is a big game. So if I'm Toronto, I'm coming in trying to have a good start because Crosby is playing some great hockey. And, let's not forget about Malkin, who's, I saw the tweets about you and look at his parents. He looks like his mom. And I don't know why they were crying. Is this his last season? I don't know, but 7 points in his last 5 games as well. So it's going to be a good game. It's a great time of year because now that I'm sitting on this side of it, you get to become a fan again. And I'll be tuning in because it's such a big game with huge playoff implications. And if I'm Toronto, again, I want to change that narrative. I have those games in hand on Florida. I want to have a little bit of an edge. I want to catch them and possibly pass them to try to get that mental edge in the playoffs. But again, Samsonov needs to have another good start because I think Crosby's going to come out hot, and it's going to be a great game tonight.
A different wrinkle, too. Michael Bunting's been exceptional since being traded in the Jake Ensel deal at the trade deadline. And, of course, you got the whole Kyle Dubas conversation. If you're the Maple Leafs, you have a chance to really put a dent in Pittsburgh's playoff chances if you beat them in regulation. And everything you just referenced about the Pens, they're playing really good hockey right now. So looking forward to that one. I want to get further in that Crosby conversation in a second, but I did want to bring up the names Timothy Liljegren and Calle Jarnkrok, who are not expected to play again in the regular season. How concerning is that for you, Stewie, going into the playoffs? If you have to throw these guys in cold, like who do you feel safer throwing in cold? Is it Liljegren? Is it Jarnkrok? Is it both? Or is it neither?
Well, it'd have to be Jarnkrok because he's older. It's tough as a younger guy to really know what's expected. If you haven't been through the rigors and the grind, it's, you come in and play a little bit tentative. But I really feel for Liljegren because before he got hurt, you could see his game going to another level. He just had more confidence with the puck on the blue line. He was a really good distributor. He looked like a young prime Klingberg, not a young Klingberg, a young prime Klingberg, where, he just seems like he had that confidence. So for him, I think if he comes back, he's going to expect to play at that level. But as a young guy, it's so tough. It takes time. So Jarnkrok, we talked about him. You know exactly what you're going to get every single shift. He's a Swiss Army knife. He's a guy that can go up and down your middle your middle 6 and play some good defensive hockey as well too. He does all those little things well. So Jarnkrok, I can think he comes in and he has a big role. But for Liljegren, coming in and his prime play is offensive, it's going to be tough to step in where you're playing against a bigger, stronger, style of hockey in the playoffs. I think, it's going to be tougher for him.
Yeah, I think quite honestly, the Liljegren injury has probably cost him game 1 of the playoffs. I just don't think he's in a position where you can throw him in cold, considering A, what we've seen in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and B, what we've seen down the stretch. He's been very inconsistent. You need guys playing their best hockey at the right time. So I would anticipate, even if he is healthy, I wouldn't expect Liljegren in the game 1 lineup. Jarnkrok, I think, is a foregone conclusion. If he tells you, yeah, I'm good to go, you put him in there. I mean, he's a Swiss Army knife. Sheldon Keefe loves him. I think he brings a lot of intangibles to the table. And you talk about depth. I think Calle Jarnkrok, quite honestly, could be massive for the Maple Leafs moving forward. So I think he gets back in that lineup when he is ready to go. But again, they really have been quite mum on both fronts, especially Jarnkrok since his injury took place a couple weeks back. The only thing sweeter than the taste of victory is starting your day off with the new Cinnabon pull-apart from Wendy's. That said, there's no reason you can't have both now that Wendy's and Daily Face-Off Fantasy are giving you a chance to win weekly prizes all season long. And hey, even if you make a few wrong picks, at least heading to Wendy's right now for a $5 Cinnabon pull-apart and a small coffee would be a great choice. Sign up for Daily Face-Off today, sponsored by Wendy's and the Wendy's app. I want to get to Crosby. I think it's fascinating. Anytime somebody has like an incredible race, throw this guy in the MVP conversation. I'm going to preface by saying Sidney Crosby has been one of my all-timers for years. You played with the guy. He is not going to win the Hart Trophy this season. I'm sorry. A small stretch of games where you're incredible. He's nowhere close to 100 points last I checked. He's around 40 goals. He has not had better seasons than Kucherov, McKinnon, Matthews, McDavid. Maybe he's top 5. Maybe he's number 5 in the top 5. But this growing narrative that Sidney Crosby should win the Hart Trophy is insane to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but remember, we're journalists and we're analysts, and we need something to talk about, right? So again, I've
guess.
seen some of those, but
It's insane to me. Like I love Crosby, but let's not create a narrative that's.
I think you got to consider it if they make the playoffs. But again, I think he's in that third tier. He's obviously in that third tier. Yeah, not the first or second tier.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but here's my big question for you, and I posed this on social over the weekend. Is this more about Sidney Crosby dragging the Pittsburgh Penguins to the playoffs, or is it more about the Taco Bell diarrhea for all these teams involved? It's been a shit show. Washington, the Islanders, like who wants this? Philadelphia's been a gong show for like 3 weeks. Like nobody seems to want this. And at the end of the day, there's Pittsburgh. They've won a couple games in a row. All of a sudden, they're in this conversation. I subscribe more than the theory that it's more about these teams not wanting it and not stepping up to the plate than it is about Crosby just dragging this team. Like what a crazy, crazy narrative in my world.
Well, it's funny because I think when was the trade deadline? 3 weeks ago,
March 8th, so about a month ago. About
a month ago, where Crosby's sitting there and he's got his hat like this and he's just talking about Jake Gensel, and he's talking as if his cat just died, right? And so he was writing this season off going like this, and then a month later, we're talking about them making the playoffs. That was my Sidney Crosby impression. But it's a good conversation to have. But again, what I don't like right now is there's always the comparison, who's better than who. And if you ask the guys that are the Hart Trophy candidates right now, who is the gold standard of best player in the world, I think it's Sidney Crosby. McDavid is chasing Sidney Crosby for greatness on the Mount Rushmore. Same thing with McKinnon, and Kucherov probably has different aspirations, being the type of player he is, but Crosby is the gold standard. And if you ask me, other than McDavid, it's going to be tough for these guys to be playing at this high level at 37 years old. I'm 39 years old right now, and I'm ready to go to Wendy's because you mentioned it about 20 minutes ago. So for him now to be doing this at such an age group, at age 37, playing at such a high level, I'm amazed. And I think that's what it is. It's that comparison where we got to keep his name relevant amongst the greats. But if you ask those greats, Sidney Crosby is still the gold standard of the NHL.
Don't forget the new Cinnabon pull-apart. Check that out today, and I'm just craving one right now as we have this conversation. That wasn't the question I posed to you. I think Sidney Crosby is great, but is he great enough to win the Hart Trophy at age 30, whatever? What is he, 37? He's an 87 born, so that would make him like a 37. No, he's not. Again, I just think it's foolish conversation. I get it. We need things to talk about, but I think this is more story about some really, really bad teams vying for playoff contention. And maybe Pittsburgh makes it. Maybe they don't. I think there's added incentive to this Maple Leafs team as they play down the stretch here. They're 1-1 so far with Pittsburgh this year. And long memory is a thing in this league. You know it, having been a former NHLer. December 16th. You remember that night? The Leafs 7, Pittsburgh 0.
I forgot about that. I thought you were going to bring up Wafflegate. I was on the ice when they threw the waffles, and I actually almost picked it up and took
it. Did you
eat
it?
Actually, I think it hit Kessel. I think it was, but yeah. But if I think why everyone wants Pittsburgh to win the Stanley Cup is because they have those goats. They have guys that have been through the been through the ringer. They know what it takes to win a Stanley Cup, and I would not be surprised to see them beat a Boston Bruins or beat a Carolina in the playoffs, right? So that is, I think, why everyone's itching and cheering for them to make it, because they want to see one last run by Sidney Crosby. If they make the playoffs there this year, the narrative is going to be, well, what is Dubas going to do in the offseason to now surround them because they're a playoff contending team, right? So again, I still think they have some big pieces to add in the offseason. But when you have Crosby, you have Malkin, who's picked up his game as of late, Letang and Carlson, who knows what's going to go on with him in the offseason, you have a chance. It's like the World Series of poker. You need a chip in a chair, and you have that big gold chip with Sidney Crosby.
The chat's buzzing today. I somehow got the chat talking about Taco Bell, which is tremendous. I don't think
I'm on it. I just discovered this chat. Yeah. It's pronounced Yank Croc, not Yank Croak. I don't care what anyone says. I'll die on that hill.
Is TML writes in, is Stewart half Italian?
Stuarty, Antonio Stuarty. I got
Yeah,
to
I
get
will
off this
say.
chat. I'll be distracted for the rest of the
I
day.
will say, I mean, Stewie did bring me to one of the best Italian restaurants in Vegas. I'll never forget that. We brought that up on the podcast. If there's
Ooh,
somebody who knows Italian joints, it's Anthony Stewart, but no, he's not Italian. Not even half,
that's
eh?
funny. That's funny. That's funny.
We're gonna trade for Anthony Stewart one day, the Italians. So the Leafs and the Pittsburgh Penguins, 8-game point streak for the Pens. Toronto's won 4-5. Samsonov's gonna start that game. Bunting's coming back yet again. How many ISO shots will there be on Kyle Dubas in this game, do you think?
If I'm him, I'm not even showing up, or I'm watching the game between the glass, right? And I think he's had the perfect stance where he understands the media is going to want to take one little comment and run away with it. And he said nothing since he's been gone. I think the Nationals been in 60 Minutes have been trying to get quotes from him because they want to blow this thing up. But again, I think he's taken the high road, and I'm sure he'd change things if he could go back and do his exit differently. But again, for him, he's got bigger problems right now. He took on a big task in rebuilding this Pittsburgh Penguins team. But I think the reason why he did it, because he understands the importance and legacy of Sidney Crosby and doing right by him, ending his career there too. It's going to be a big challenge, I think, bigger than the one he took with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there's going to be a lot of ISOs. There's probably going to be some gifts. You're going to have a couple of memes ready to go. And I'm excited to watch it because, again, it's a good storyline, not just for the Toronto Maple Leafs and hockey in Canada, but I think for the entire league as well.
It's called pretentiousness, man. That's why he doesn't talk. He didn't talk when he was the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He ain't talking right now. He's not going to talk in 15 years. That's good for him. Didn't win anything with this market and this team, but I digress. A couple people want to know about the 2005 World Junior team. You got any cool stories you can bring on the podcast here?
But yeah, so we lost the year before into the US. We had a 3-1 lead, and that was when Fleury shot the puck off of
Adios,
Coburn.
Sullivan.
Yeah, so I was the leading scorer in that tournament, believe it or not, and one of the top scorers and MVPs of the tournament. And part of the reason why we lost is because we were young hotshots. We were 18-year-olds. Majority of the team were 18-year-old first-round draft picks. And, we're talking about that team is the best ever. Could we play in the NHL that year? So we weren't prepared to win at that time. So they brought in Brent Sutter, one of the Sutter brothers, to be the coach. And his first order of business was, Stewie is the ringleader of all the shenanigans, so make sure you put him in check early. And he threatened to cut me in camp. He's like, you're not scoring. I don't like your game. But my agent actually gave me a heads up saying, if they bark at you, bark back. He likes that type of thing. So I said, well, if you put me on a scoring line, I'm going to score. I'll be a top scorer. So he's like, okay, well, if you don't score, you're cut. I'm like, I don't care. So I went from almost being cut to being on the team. And again, just messing with me again. They had me weigh in at the team dinner. So we had a team dinner. I had a huge plate of food, probably, steak, chicken, everything. And they weighed me in, and the whole team is surrounding the scale. And somehow they mimicked the scale or messed with the scale. It said 275 pounds. So they're like, oh, Stewart's out of shape and this and that. So they put me in like a 13th forward jersey. So I was 13th forward for the first game. So majority of the beginning of the tournament was them just messing with me because they knew I could handle it, to now say, well, if they're doing this to Stewart, who was the leading scorer the year before, they're going to do that to anybody. So everyone was on their toes, and we ended up winning that tournament. But for me, the number one thing was seeing Sidney Crosby go from a 16-year-old where, there's a picture of me having my arm around him because he wasn't playing much, saying, hey, don't worry about it, kid. You'll be okay. To him the next season in 2005 being the best player in the world. And there's actually a picture of him around me saying, hey, Stewie, don't worry about it. You'll be good. So seeing him, seeing Bergeron, seeing the Jeff Carter show, the Ryan Getzlaf, seeing, 10 Stanley Cups, 1,000 plus games for 10 plus guys, seeing that at 18, 19 years old was definitely amazing. And those guys are still my good buddies to this day.
Mike Richards is on that team too, right?
Yep. Our line was myself, Richards, and Nigel Dawes. So we were the top line the year before, but that just shows the talent. We went from top line in 04 to third line in 05.
Dude, that was the heyday of the World Juniors. I told you this. I worked with Patrick O'Sullivan at NHL Network Radio, and the first thing I said, I'm like, dude, I still remember that like it was yesterday. And it was this is probably like, I want to say 6 to 8 years ago that I worked with Pat, and it still was so crystal clear in my mind. The Marc-Andre Fleury shot, man, It hurt, man. That hurt. I can only imagine what it was like for you.
Oh, everyone was devastated. And I was the only one of the few guys that was able to do an interview because my number one concern was I didn't have a ride home back to Kingston from the airport. So I was like, shit, I got to get back to Kingston. How am I going to get back? And meanwhile, these guys are all devastated. So it just shows, I had some real world problems, but it was a great tournament. And it's funny, I actually had real beef with Sullivan because this is around 2015 when, chirp Twitter was a big thing.
Yeah.
And he'd always chirp me around Christmas time, or I almost like I got to find this guy and let him know exactly how I feel because he was cutting a little bit too deep with the chirps there. But again, they had an older team and they had Kessler and David Booth, and we were a young team and we just mentally weren't able to handle it. But I'm sure those lessons that we learned in that 04 year, that showed these guys for the rest of their careers, you got to have your foot on the gas and don't take anything for granted.
And a cool little tie-in, the first ever one-piece stick I got was actually from Patrick O'Sullivan. My brother got me a Christmas gift, I think 2 years after that, and it was a stick. He knew somebody who knew O'Sullivan, and I got it was my grip synergy from Patty O'Sullivan, man. It's like coming full circle.
And going back to
like,
that draft, that 03 draft, again, I was 7th overall in the OHL draft. Patrick O'Sullivan was first, and that was with the Jeff Carters, the Corey Perrys, the some other, Nathan Hortons. He was the most talented player in that draft. I'll tell you that. There was Jared. He was the most talented. The stuff he could do with that puck. He was Robbie Schremp before Robbie Schremp. He was Mitch Marner before Mitch Marner. The stuff that he was doing with the puck on a consistent basis, he was the most talented player. He's more talented. I'm telling you, he was more talented than McDavid in junior. So again, please don't put that as the headline because I don't want to deal with Twitter, but from a player that was there, he was.
Well, great to know. The chat wanted further clarification that you actually played hockey. Yes, he was on the World Junior team. He played in the National Hockey League. So thank you, that Anthony Stewart. The Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Betano is the official partner of Copa America 2024, taking the beautiful game to new heights in the Americas. Join Betano on their journey of passion, unity, and unforgettable football moments. Any plays you like tonight? I think the easy one is Auston Matthews anytime goal. I think you play the 4.5 shots too. That's probably where I would look, and I'm looking forward to this one. Again, some added spice with Pittsburgh playing the way they have been the last little while.
Yeah, and you got to put it up for Sidney Crosby anytime goal as well too, as he's scoring and he's got that team on his back. But why not put some more ducats in on Auston Matthews scoring more than one goal? Why not?
Why
not put two? Because again, I think what's going to happen is going to come down to this last 2 games, and he needs 1 goal or 2 goals, and the narrative is going to be, does he play those last 2 games? So I think for that to happen, he's got to score a bunch in the next couple, and I think tonight's going to be the night. Understanding the gravity towards this game, there's only 2 games in the league tonight. It's him versus Sidney Crosby. I could see him having both of them having a big game.
I had Matthews over 1.5 goals on Saturday, and he scored early, and I'm like, well, this is going to be easy, and then didn't score for the rest of the night. I thought the empty netter was going to hit, but you're right. I think if this guy does get to 70, he needs one more multi-goal game at the very least, and I think it happens maybe with Dubas in town, with Crosby in town, so that's a really, really good look. The chat's been on fire all show long. Atomic Leaf writes in, Stewart has earned a Baconator, so congratulations to you, Stewie. All right, Anthony, great stuff today, Stu. You're going to be back in the mix on Wednesday. We're going to recap the Leafs-Devils game. It's the back end of the back-to-back, right?
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm sure next time we'll be talking is if they win the next game, do they pass the Florida Panthers? So I'm looking forward to that chat.
Ooh, okay. So Carter Hutton's going to be in the mix tomorrow. We're going to recap this game, the Leafs and the Pittsburgh Penguins, look ahead to that Devils game. And Darren Panger is going to drop by and give his thoughts on this Maple Leafs team. Of course, does great work with NBC Sports Chicago, as well as TNT. Has got a history with covering Carter Hutton as well. So looking forward to that conversation. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You guys were exceptional today. Hope you enjoy the eclipse or whatever it's transpiring outside. But most importantly, enjoy this Maple Leafs game. Pittsburgh in town. Looking forward to that at the Leafs Nation 401. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts. And make sure you have a great day, great Monday. Be safe. And thank you to producer Vic. For Anthony Stewart, I'm Nick Alberga. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosa. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.